Marcus Johnson, a 32-year-old delivery driver, wakes up early in his modest apartment on the outskirts of the bustling city. His neatly kept home reflects his disciplined nature. Marcus is tall and fit, with kind brown eyes and a determined expression that often hides his fatigue. A former college athlete, Marcus had dreams of playing professional basketball, but a torn ligament forced him to pivot his ambitions. Now, Marcus focuses on providing for his younger sister, Jasmine, who is in medical school. He works tirelessly, often taking double shifts, while dreaming of a future where his family can thrive. Despite the systemic hurdles he faces daily as a black man, Marcus exudes resilience and compassion. He's known in the community for his willingness to lend a hand, whether helping a neighbor fix their car or mentoring kids at the local rec center. Yet, beneath his calm demeanor, Marcus carries the weight of past injustices. Moments when his skin color dictated how he was treated, even in situations where he was clearly in the right. He strives to push through, holding tightly to the values his late mother instilled in him: honesty, hard work, and dignity. Officer Brad Mitchell, a 45-year-old cop with 2 decades on the force, walks through the brightly lit precinct, his badge gleaming on his chest. Brad is broad-shouldered and sports a clean-shaven face that belies the animosity simmering just beneath the surface. His colleagues respect his experience, but his methods have always been questionable. Brad believes in maintaining order, often at the expense of fairness. He masks his prejudices with a veneer of professionalism, but those who know him closely have seen his disdain for people who don't look like him. Brad has faced multiple complaints for racial profiling, though none ever resulted in disciplinary action, thanks to a system designed to protect its own. Today, Brad's mood is sour. Recent protests against police misconduct have made him defensive, and his irritation shows in his curt orders to subordinates. In his mind, he's the hero of every story, a man tasked with keeping the streets clean from the so-called troublemakers. The city of Greenhaven is a patchwork of contrasts. On one side are gleaming high-rise buildings where the wealthy sip their morning coffee on sunlit balconies. On the other are the crowded streets of neighborhoods like Sunnyside, where Marcus lives. Here, families share laughter and meals despite peeling paint on walls and cracked sidewalks. Marcus' route as a delivery driver takes him through both worlds, a daily reminder of the systemic divide. The bustling markets of Sunnyside buzz with activity. Vendors hawking fresh produce, children playing tag in narrow alleys, and the hum of community resilience. Yet, this vibrancy often draws unwanted attention. Police cars frequently patrol the area, their presence a stark reminder of the tension that hangs in the air like a storm cloud. Greenhaven's wealthier districts, by contrast, are calm and orderly, with tree-lined streets and quiet parks. The disparity is striking, but Marcus has learned to navigate both worlds with caution and adaptability. It's a Friday morning when Marcus leaves for work, his earbuds in as he listens to his favorite motivational podcast. He doesn't notice the police cruiser parked down the block, its engine idling. Officer Brad Mitchell sits inside, scanning the area. He watches Marcus with narrowed eyes, misinterpreting his purposeful stride as suspicious behavior. Brad has been in this neighborhood before, and his biases shape what he sees. A black man carrying a package in a crime-prone area. Marcus continues to his delivery van, oblivious to the storm brewing. He hums softly to himself, looking forward to a quiet day of work. Unbeknownst to him, this seemingly ordinary day will change the course of his life forever. As Marcus finishes loading packages into his delivery van, he hears the distinct sound of a police siren wailing behind him. Confused, he turns to see a patrol car pulling up with its lights flashing. Marcus pauses, his brow furrowing. He hasn't done anything wrong. Officer Brad Mitchell steps out, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "Hey you!" Brad shouts, his voice sharp and commanding. "What are you doing here?" Marcus takes a deep breath, steadying himself. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "Delivering packages," he replies, gesturing to the branded van behind him. Brad's eyes narrow as he scans Marcus, his gaze cold and scrutinizing. "Job, huh? Looks like you're casing houses to me," he says, walking closer. Marcus feels his stomach tighten. "No, sir. I have the delivery list right here," he says, reaching into his pocket for his phone. "Hands where I can see them." Brad barks, his hand now firmly gripping his gun. The escalation is sudden, and Marcus freezes, his heart pounding. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he says, his voice steady but tinged with fear. Ignoring him, Brad radios in a report. "Suspicious individual, possible burglary in progress." Within minutes, 2 more officers arrive. Despite Marcus calmly explaining his situation, Brad orders him to turn around and place his hands behind his back. "You're under arrest for attempted burglary," Brad says flatly, pulling out handcuffs. Marcus protests, his voice rising. "I didn't do anything. This is my job." But his words fall on deaf ears. As Brad cuffs him, the other officers start rummaging through the delivery van. One of them pulls out a package and holds it up triumphantly, as if it's evidence of wrongdoing. Marcus feels the cold steel of the handcuffs biting into his wrists as the officers push him toward the patrol car. His mind races with disbelief and panic. He's done nothing wrong. Yet here he is, being treated like a criminal. "Please, this is a mistake. Check my ID, my work badge. It's all in the van." Marcus pleads, his voice breaking slightly. Brad smirks, his expression devoid of empathy. "Tell it to the judge," he snaps, shoving Marcus into the back seat. As the car door slams shut, Marcus stares out the window, his chest tightening with frustration and fear. He thinks of Jasmine and the promise he made to always be there for her. His job, his reputation, his freedom, all hang precariously in the balance. Tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but he blinks them away. He won't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Instead, he starts mentally cataloging everything he needs to remember. What was said, how he was treated. He'll need to fight this, but for now, he feels utterly powerless. Marcus's arrest sends immediate shockwaves through his life. His supervisor at the delivery company tries to reach him when he doesn't show up to the next stop, but the phone rings unanswered. It's been confiscated by the officers. Meanwhile, Jasmine receives a call from a neighbor who witnessed the scene. She rushes to the police station, panicked and confused. Her brother, her protector, is behind bars for something he didn't do. By the time Marcus is booked and processed, rumors begin to spread in Sunnyside. Some neighbors rally to support him, but others whisper in hushed tones, unsure of what to believe. Marcus spends a night in a cold, cramped holding cell, replaying the day's events over and over in his mind. He knows he's innocent, but the reality of his situation feels like a nightmare. His employer is unaware of his whereabouts, his family is worried sick, and his reputation is at risk of being permanently tarnished. For Marcus, this is more than an arrest. It's an assault on his dignity, his livelihood, and his very identity. The next morning, Marcus wakes to the harsh clang of the cell door as the officer on duty announces breakfast. Sleep had been a luxury Marcus couldn't afford, his mind trapped in an endless loop of confusion, anger, and fear. The reality of his circumstances feels like a heavy weight pressing on his chest. Outside the station, the incident has begun to attract attention. A neighbor who filmed the arrest uploads the video to social media, showing Marcus being cuffed and led away despite his calm demeanor and protests of innocence. The footage goes viral within hours, sparking outrage in Sunnyside and beyond. Brad, however, remains steadfast in his accusations. "We caught him red-handed," he claims to his superiors, presenting the package from the van as supposed evidence. The other officers back him up, unwilling to question their colleague. The system that has shielded Brad from accountability for years continues to work in his favor. The community's reaction is mixed. Many in Sunnyside rally to Marcus's defense, organizing protests outside the police station. Others, wary of the consequences of standing up to authority, stay silent. The growing tension puts the police department on edge, but they double down, painting Marcus as a suspect with a history of suspicious behavior. Jasmine arrives at the station, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with determination. She's been on the phone all night, reaching out to anyone who might help. A local civil rights lawyer, Naomi Clark, agrees to take Marcus's case pro bono. Naomi, a sharp and experienced attorney, is no stranger to cases like this. I've seen this too many times, Naomi tells Jasmine as they walk into the station. We're going to fight this, but it won't be easy. Inside, they finally meet Marcus in the visitation room. His shoulders slump with exhaustion, but his face lights up when he sees Jasmine. I didn't do anything, he says quietly, his voice cracking. We know, Jasmine replies, her voice firm. We're going to prove it. Meanwhile, a journalist named Ethan Torres hears about the case from a colleague. Known for his investigative reporting, Ethan begins digging into Brad's record, uncovering a troubling pattern of complaints and accusations of misconduct. As Marcus sits in his cell, he reflects on the events that led him here. He replays every moment of the arrest, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. The humiliation of being dragged away in handcuffs still stings. But what cuts deeper is the realization of how easily his life could be destroyed by a lie. I've worked so hard to stay out of trouble, he thinks, his fists clenching. I've done everything right. How did it come to this? Anger wells up inside him, but it's accompanied by a crushing sense of helplessness. The odds feel insurmountable. The system that should protect him seems designed to work against him. But Marcus is not one to give up. Despite his despair, a spark of determination ignites within him. He thinks of Jasmine, of the sacrifices their mother made to give them a better life. He resolves to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone who has been wrongfully targeted and silenced. His resolve strengthens further when Naomi visits him with good news. There's CCTV footage from a nearby store, she says. It might show what really happened. Marcus feels a glimmer of hope, but that hope is tempered by doubt. Will the truth be enough to set him free? Naomi's team obtains the CCTV footage from a store across the street. The grainy video shows Marcus loading packages into his van, oblivious to the approaching patrol car. It also captures Brad stepping out of his cruiser, his posture aggressive from the start. The footage clearly contradicts Brad's version of events, but it hasn't been released to the public yet. Naomi strategizes carefully, knowing that timing will be critical. This footage could be our ace, she tells Marcus during their next meeting. But we need to make sure it's used effectively. Meanwhile, Brad grows increasingly defensive as whispers of the footage reach the precinct. His fellow officers begin to question him, but his bravado remains intact. It's just another attempt to discredit good cops, he says, though his voice lacks its usual confidence. As the community protests intensify, the stage is set for a dramatic confrontation. Marcus, though still behind bars, senses the tide beginning to turn. The morning the CCTV footage is released, it spreads across social media like wildfire. The video, clear despite its grainy quality, reveals everything. Marcus calmly loading packages into his van, Brad approaching with an air of aggression, and the fabricated evidence being retrieved from the delivery vehicle, a package Brad had subtly placed moments earlier. The public reaction is swift and intense. The narrative shifts almost immediately. Hashtags like Justice for Marcus and Hold Brad Accountable trend globally. News outlets pick up the story, dissecting every frame of the footage. Civil rights advocates amplify the conversation, calling for systemic change and accountability. At the precinct, Brad watches the footage on his computer screen, his jaw tightening. The smug confidence he carried begins to falter as he realizes the damning evidence against him. His colleagues, once unquestioningly loyal, start to distance themselves. We need to talk, Brad, his superior says, summoning him into the office. Meanwhile, Marcus sits in a conference room with Naomi, Jasmine, and Ethan. Naomi's phone buzzes nonstop with calls and notifications. This is the breakthrough we needed, she tells Marcus, her voice firm with resolve. They can't ignore this. As the footage continues to gain traction, Ethan's investigation into Brad's past uncovers a shocking pattern of behavior. Over the years, Brad has been the subject of multiple complaints, ranging from excessive force to racial profiling. Many of these complaints were quietly dismissed or buried, but now they resurface with renewed scrutiny. One particularly damning report involves another black man who faced a similar situation years earlier. That man, unable to prove his innocence, lost his job and struggled to rebuild his life. They knew about Brad, Ethan tells Naomi during a late-night call, and they let him keep going. Public outrage reaches a boiling point. Protests outside the precinct grow larger, with people demanding justice not only for Marcus, but also for others who suffered under Brad's abuse of power. The department, under immense pressure, places Brad on administrative leave pending an investigation. For Brad, the unraveling is swift. Former colleagues begin to speak out, revealing a toxic culture within the department that allowed him to operate unchecked. The once confident officer finds himself isolated and vilified, his career hanging by a thread. For Marcus, the release of the footage brings a wave of relief, but also an overwhelming mix of emotions. Sitting in Naomi's office, watching the footage for the first time, he feels a lump rise in his throat. The world now sees the truth, but the memory of being handcuffed, humiliated, and treated like a criminal still lingers. Jasmine reaches over and squeezes his hand. "They can't deny it anymore," she says softly, her voice steady. Marcus nods, but his thoughts are a whirlwind. What if the footage hadn't been there? He wonders aloud. The question haunts him, how close he came to losing everything because of a lie. As the days pass, Marcus begins to feel a sense of vindication. The outpouring of support from his community, strangers online, and activists across the country bolsters his resolve. He participates in interviews, sharing his story to shine a light on systemic injustice. But the trauma isn't so easily erased. Marcus finds himself jumping at loud noises, his heart racing when he sees a police car. In therapy sessions arranged by Naomi's firm, he begins to unpack the fear and humiliation he endured. Healing takes time, his therapist tells him, but you've already shown incredible strength. Despite the lingering pain, Marcus starts to envision a future where his experience can lead to meaningful change. He collaborates with local organizations, advocating for police accountability and reform. Though the scars remain, he channels his anger and pain into a mission for justice. As the days pass, Marcus begins to rebuild his life, step by step. The constant support from Jasmine and Naomi helps him regain a sense of control. Jasmine makes it a point to stay close, ensuring her brother feels not just heard, but safe. The two siblings reconnect, spending long hours together, sharing meals, and talking about the future, one where Marcus can thrive without fear. Their family, once fractured by stress and uncertainty, becomes stronger. Their mother, who had always been the quiet pillar of their household, finally opens up about her own experiences with racial injustice, adding a layer of depth to the conversations they now have about healing and resistance. Marcus also reconnects with old friends, many of whom reach out to offer support. One of his colleagues at the delivery company arranges a small fundraiser to help with legal fees and lost wages. The gesture, while small, helps Marcus feel that he's not alone in this journey. In therapy, Marcus makes significant strides in processing his trauma. His therapist helps him confront the deep-rooted fear that lingers after the arrest, as well as the anger that has slowly turned into a desire to fight for others facing similar injustices. Through these sessions, Marcus starts to feel empowered, not by the injustice he suffered, but by the strength he finds within himself and his community. The ripple effects of Marcus's case extend far beyond his own life. The public outcry leads to an official investigation into Brad's actions, culminating in his dismissal from the force. In a rare turn of events, several other officers who had been complicit in the misconduct come forward, exposing a pattern of corruption within the department. This leads to the creation of an independent review board tasked with holding officers accountable for misconduct. Marcus's story continues to inspire, with activists and local leaders organizing town hall meetings to discuss police reform. The community rallies behind these initiatives, demanding that local law enforcement undergo significant changes in how they interact with Black communities. New programs are introduced to improve transparency, increase community involvement, and ensure that instances of racial profiling are immediately addressed. In the wake of these changes, Marcus becomes a central figure in the movement for police reform, working alongside organizations that advocate for justice and accountability. He speaks at rallies, participates in interviews, and uses his experience as a catalyst to make a real difference. For Marcus, this newfound purpose is transformative. He's no longer just a victim of circumstance, but a voice for those who have been silenced for far too long. While the scars of his experience will never fully fade, Marcus now sees them as a symbol of the strength and resilience that he can share with others. One evening, as Marcus stands in front of a crowd at a community rally, he reflects on how far he's come. He no longer sees the incident as just an event in his life. It's part of a much larger story, a story of systemic oppression, but also of resistance, resilience, and the power of community. As he speaks to the crowd, he realizes that his journey, while deeply personal, has also been a collective one. The voices of countless individuals who have been unjustly targeted by the system have carried him forward. His voice, now amplified by the stories of others, has become a beacon of hope for those still fighting for justice. I didn't choose this fight, he reflects quietly in his mind. But now that I'm here, I'll see it through. For everyone who's still out there, still fighting to be heard. The final scene captures Marcus walking alongside Jasmine, both of them headed toward a community event for police reform. The sky is tinged with orange and pink as the sun sets, symbolizing the dawn of a new chapter. They walk side by side, not as two individuals weighed down by fear or trauma, but as individuals transformed by their experiences. As they arrive at the event, Marcus pauses for a moment, looking around at the crowd. There are parents holding their children's hands, community leaders shaking hands with activists, and strangers offering words of encouragement. It's a vision of hope, of change made possible by collective action. Marcus feels the weight of the moment, knowing that his fight is far from over, but that it's a fight worth continuing. With Jasmine by his side and the community backing him, he knows that the power of truth, justice, and resilience will carry him through any obstacle. With a deep breath, Marcus steps forward, ready to lead, inspire, and be the change he once only dreamed of. The fight for justice doesn't end with one case. Every day, lives are affected by systemic inequality and oppression. Share Marcus's story and help amplify the voices of those fighting for change. Let's continue the conversation, challenge the status quo, and demand accountability. Like, share, and subscribe to uncover more stories that matter. Together, we can inspire change.